So what is next for Ukraine? Will Putin send in the tanks? Will the country split apart? Or can this beleaguered nation pull back from the brink, where it lies squeezed between Russia and the West? A lot of questions, but not so many answers. Ukraine's ousted president Viktor Yanukovych is still AWOL, though in an interview this weekend, somewhere in the eastern Ukraine, he claimed to still be president, with Kiev, he said, taken over by bandits. Meantime, those bandits, a.k.a. the opposition, are planning to name Ukraine's new government on Tuesday. And for now, they've issued an arrest warrant for Yanukovych after charging him with the mass killing of 88 people, both protesters and police, all gunned down in street battles last week. The United States and Europe are warning Russia to respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, and they're frantically trying to come up with an aid package to tide the nation over because Yanukovych leaves Ukraine in a desperate hole. Take a look at this. Troves of files fished out of a lake by divers documenting the fugitive president's lavish spending. Now the interim finance minister says Ukraine will need $35 billion in foreign aid by the end of next year. I'm joined now from New York by Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations, Yuri Sergeyev, who today is asking many of the same critical questions. Ambassador, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. And may I start by asking you, do you even know who you are working for right now? Do you accept that a new government will be presented tomorrow and it is one that you will be able to work for?
Thank you for inviting me. I used to work and I keep working for the state and for the people, not for the leaders and the governments. We are waiting for the new government to be appointed tomorrow.
And how do you think that that is going to go? Is that going to be accepted? Do you believe that Ukraine is on a political path that will be constructive? Or are we still caught in a lot of instability?
I absolutely sure that we have a lot of wisdom to keep the path for recovering from all these clashes, understanding well the roots of the social protests, and to keep Ukraine going in the direction which could satisfy all the citizens of Ukraine, from the west to the east, from the north to the south.
So then let me ask you, do you feel, like many have voiced fears, that there could be some kind of a split? Some people have posited the notion of not just a civil war, but that Russia might intervene in any which way, whether it's militarily or with influence, to try to prise the Russian-dominated eastern part of Ukraine away. Do you think that's a possibility?
Thank you for that question, because really at these days, Russian propaganda, which is covering seriously Ukrainian information sphere, keep telling that we are to be splitted, that the process was launched. And luckily we have good signs. Let me quote you today's briefing of the governor of the biggest region on the east, Donetsk region, Andrei Shishansky. He stated the following, I quote, "Today, fortunately, we have stated at least one legitimate authority in Ukraine, Verkhovna Rada, it's our parliament. And today, the only way to get away from the streets is to enact legislation in the parliament. It is important to preserve the integrity and independence." What he said reflects the real story. People, they don't want any civil war. People want to be united, because people who were in the streets, they faced the same problem in their life.
Mm-hmm. So that seems to be good news, that you're feeling fairly confident of that. And of course, President Putin has spoken with Angela Merkel, and obviously the US has been speaking to the foreign minister there and warning them to respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. But on the issue of where Ukraine sits, as I said, squeezed between Russia and the West, all of this started because President Yanukovych, former President Yanukovych, at the last minute, did not sign that association agreement with the EU. Can Ukraine be someone or a country that has great relations with the West and great relations with Russia as well?
For sure. The main trend, the main direction is to be associated with European Union. It is, this is exactly what we had in our legislation formally. This is what the previous government and the president tried to pursue the population, and they betrayed. Now it is not logical to divide Ukraine either to Europe or to Russia or with Russia. So this is not alternative. We are for sure with Europe, but we should have a good neighborhood relations with Russia as well.
Mm-hmm. So what about this massive hole that Ukraine is in? The new interim finance minister says that your country is going to need something like $35 billion of aid in the next year and a half by the end of 2015. Who is going to give that to you, do you think? And at what cost? What is Ukraine going to have to do in terms of structural and political reforms?
First of all, we have to learn exactly what happened. Last year, the government, previous government, kept saying that we are in a race, that economy is in a good stance. But now we discovered that it was not true. What should we do now to retain confidence from our foreign and domestic investors, to attract the recovery of economy in general? Then we are to conduct the negotiations which were stopped with the IMF. We are to conduct the negotiations with European Union to get support from there. We heard from both IMF and from European Union the recent statements about their readiness to help Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But not in a way to give just some money, but a money which could work to help Ukraine to make necessary reform and to have a stable development in all our spheres.
Ambassador, I just want to refer back to a few questions before I asked you, and you seem to answer with an implicit criticism of the Yanukovych government, that they had done things which simply were not acceptable. Are you surprised by the level of corruption that has now been uncovered, personal corruption? And are you surprised by the violence and the order that was given by somebody to fire on those protesters using live bullets?
Yeah, the recent discoveries of Ukrainian journalists and just shown by your channel, shocked many, because the demonstrative stance of President Yanukovych was, well, a pure Christian. He was visiting churches, praying for the people, but as we know now that he prayed for them, but did absolutely different. He thought about only his wealthy. He collected luxury cars in an amount which comparable to Brezhnev. So even his own party was shocked with that. And still there is a big faction, more than 100 people of his former party, that made a statement which so strong that explains the real situation, that even his surroundings is surprised, and they started to reshuffle themselves and to separate themselves from what he did. Let me just quote a few things. I quote the statement of the faction of the Party of Regions. Is from their official website. Ukraine was betrayed and people were forced to revile, and all responsibility is in the hands of Viktor Yanukovych and his closest circle.
Wow.
The members of the Party of Regions strongly condemn unlawful orders which led to human losses, political and economic crisis, and put Ukraine on the brink of collapse, leading to the threat of separation. This is what appeared yesterday on the official side of the party.
Well, it's very strong stuff, Ambassador, and clearly many people condemning Yanukovych for his responsibility in this regard. Just briefly and finally, do you feel that the new government will be able to lead Ukraine forward? We've seen reformist governments in the past collapse into squabbling, they couldn't move their way beyond their own political arguments?
We should. As I stated yesterday at the big Ukrainian manifestation here in New York, this is exactly the time when Ukraine is fighting for its real independence. And to keep this independence, we should build this sustainable situation both in social, political, financial, and economic. We need professionals, and we need to be united.
Ambassador Sergeyev, thank you so much indeed for joining me. Fascinating.